Welcome back to the plaster cast tile, which is now been drying for about 48 hours. It is completely dry. I can not only feel that, but also hear it. So, you know, pay caution to the wind, leave it for longer if you're uncertain. As I said, mine's quite thin, so it hasn't taken too long to dry. But just make sure it is dry. I've obviously still got my pigment rubbing, which I did on top, so you could see the marks I was making. I've left that on. The black oil-based ink will just cover that. I've got here some, this is Origami Factory Japanese paper. This is actually an Aksakuchi paper. It's 39 grams. It's kind of what I like to use as my stock Japanese paper. I think it's a real nice weight. I don't think they make this actually anymore, so I'm lucky enough I've got a batch, but there are loads of Japanese papers out there. It just makes it easier hand printing rather than having to hand print through a really heavyweight 270 or 300 grams paper. I would advise going for a lighter weight. Also got some black, just basic black oil-based ink here. If you're using the water-based inks and everything, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to use this on the plaster cast. You can hear it's quite a thick hiss I've gone for, slightly more than I would be if I was doing lino cut, just because the plaster has a tendency to absorb the first layer. Now, I did mention, as I have in the previous film of this, before you print you just want to brush off with a soft brush the top surface to get rid of all those bits that were kicked up, and I've already done that. I did that outside to make sure all the plaster dust was not being breathed in. So that's all ready to print, and as I said in the previous film, I've just lightly cleaned off the edges, softened them. I used a palette knife just to make sure they don't catch on the roller. What we're going to be doing is literally going to be rolling up with the roller over the top surface and then hand printing and seeing what we have. Now, you can also seal your plaster surface before you go in straight away with the ink. There are various plaster sealants out there, so have a search for which one you prefer. I'm going straight in with the ink, and then what I tend to do, it's kind of a cheats method, I tend to then leave the ink to dry on the plaster after my first print, and that kind of acts as a seal. But as I said, there are various other professional sealants out there for plaster which you can have a rummage around and look which one you want. I'm just going to move my paper out of the way so it doesn't get splattered. I'm just going to start rolling up. And obviously be nice and gentle when rolling the plaster, especially if you've got a thin piece like me, because any extra weight in certain areas it might snap. It's not something you really want to be happening. Get those edges. And the trick is to build up in layers. Don't whack a load of really thick on ink to start with all over. That's why it's got a nice hiss, but it's not really gloopy. Because if you start putting on lots and lots of really thick ink, it will just infill all these lovely sand marks, which you don't want to happen. You want a nice clean print.
Mummy,
You see? Yep.
why are you hand printing it?
Well, because if I put this under a printing press at really high pressure, what do you think is going to happen to my plaster tile?
Crack.
Yeah, it'll crack. And it's highlighted a very good point. We are hand printing these because under the pressure of a press, the plaster has a massive tendency just to crack. So it is a case of hand printing. But you can already see the beautiful marks that are coming out of this, which is really rather exciting. It's also very energetic. Lino cut sometimes struggles to get the energy of a cut mark.
Mummy, there's one bit there next to
I
the
know.
lines that's not picking up the ink.
These bits here, yeah, I know. Sometimes you have to work some areas, particularly the first layer. So apologies for the arm in front of the camera here. It's getting there, Gwyneth. Oh, that bit you were pointing to. Good spot.
There's one bit down at the corner.
Oh, down there. See if we can get that bit down there. Just take it steady and slowly, no rush. No rush in any of these videos. I'm not one for panicking in printmaking. I rush when I need to. Other than that, just work efficiently rather than rushing. Rushing.
There's one bit big.
I know. Last bit. There we go.
Sneaky bit.
Sneaky bit. Now, if you're really enjoying this method and you really like the way it prints, and you know you want to do more of them, part of the reason some of these areas may not ink up is because when you cast the tile, this top surface here may be level, but the underside isn't necessarily level, and so you're working with a sort of uneven surface on the back, which therefore makes a slight wobble on the front. What you can do is when you cast your plaster in your mould, you can, for instance, this is an example, you could add a backing piece of wood to the same size as the tile. So when you pour the plaster into the mould to get a nice tile, you then add a piece of timber the same size as the tile with drill holes in it, and you just sort of float that on top of the plaster, give it a wiggle, and the plaster will seep up into the drill holes, but you'll end up with a nice flat surface. Make sure that wood is level, check with the spirit level before the plaster sets. The plaster seeps up into the drill holes, the two bond, and then you've got a nice flat surface of wood underneath. That's one possibility. Right, I'm just going to remove that out of the way. Yes, Gwyneth, you were going to say something.
There's one bit down at the bottom.
Down there, no, I think...
No, it's
down here?
Yeah.
No, that's part of my sandpaper mark, I think, actually, Gwyneth.
No, I don't think it is.
So I think we are ready to print. Just bring that up to the camera so you can have a look at the effect. You can see it prints really nice sort of energetic marks. Okay, so make sure I'm just printing on the right side of the paper, the correct side. On it goes. Again, the advantage of Japanese paper, you can see where you're printing. Now I'm using my hand printing baren. There are various different types. You could use a wooden spoon. I'm just going to have to be extra careful with my very thin tile that I don't put too much pressure in one particular point and it starts to crack. So I'm just taking it very slowly, as you can see. If you've got a thicker tile, you can be a bit quicker about it and a bit firmer pressure all over. Or if you have a wooden backing, again, very useful, because at the moment if I put pressure on a particular point on my plaster tile and there might be an air bubble caught there, it's rocking and putting pressure on that particular point, and that's when there's a shearing force or a force that will potentially cause a crack. So I'm just taking it easily and steadily. Gosh, it's cold today. Just been out to the shoreline. It was cold, but fun.
Freezing!
Freezing!
I had to wear thermals.
Yeah, all in thermals. Let's have a peek. Ooh. Okay, so my pressure, I was just having a peek to check my pressure.
It's perfect.
Is it perfect? Thanks. Doesn't often happen though. Again, nice circular motions all over. Use different parts of the wooden spoon or the baren to create an even pressure or point pressure. A peek at that bit down there. Oh, they're the cheese, they're not cheese grated, they're zester marks.
Yeah, I love them.
They're good, aren't they? I love them as well. They're very satisfyingly parallel. They're very satisfying, I like them. It's also nice to occasionally zester printing plate, or cheese graters is printing plate. Adds a bit of energy. Okay, almost there. Just going to flip this around this way. Okay, you'll notice I'm always holding the paper as well with my non-printing hand. Just keep it in place. You should get a natural tack between the paper and the ink, but just be on play caution to the wind and be on the safe side. Just hold your paper in place. Getting those edges in. I think we're good. So I'm going to peel this off towards the camera. Look at that!
Mommy, I can see a sandpaper mark.
I know, isn't it beautiful? Absolutely beautiful. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to place that up there and this down here, like that. And you can see it's a very, very clean print. I'll bring the print up to the camera shortly, but just whilst we've got the two on the plan chest, it's the energy involved is absolutely beautiful, and like these chisel marks and the little sandpaper scuffles which were here, that was just done with some household sandpaper, have printed. Any mark that is below the surface, it creates an effect. You know, this was again the sandpaper along here. The roulette, the dressmaker's roulette, beautiful little dots. Etching needle, these very clean lines down here. That was obviously the zester. Got lots of cheese gratering going on. That's awesome. Real energy involved, which is very difficult to get in relief printing. This sort of dynamicism, that's what I'm trying to say. Really, really effective. And again, more sort of just real energy going on here, which is great. Really, really beautiful marks. This was the awl, so slightly thicker needle than the etching needle. And when I hold it up to the camera, it's got a little puckered edge, so it is very different to the etching needle. So if I just come and bring this up here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a piece of white paper to go underneath. Hang on a sec. Here we go, because otherwise it'll be difficult to get a clean image. And it's absolutely, really quite stunning. Let me show you. A real range of mark making, and you can addition from this, and if you sealed your plaster so it lasted for longer length of time and was a thicker tile and even backed with a wood backing, this is a highly additionable method of printing. You know, it's pretty tough. Eventually the plaster obviously does start to wear at the edges because it is a soft material, but the essence of you can easily get a 10 to 20 if not more addition from it, I would have thought. And just the energy involved there in the relief. I mean, relief printing tends to be very tight sometimes, and this is why I like the plaster. It's very bold, very direct, really quite beautiful. There we go, that is relief plaster cast printing. Hope you enjoyed that. I'm about to set up for the next plaster cast printing, which is something completely different again. So yeah, that is really good fun. Have fun, enjoy. Make sure you don't breathe in the dust and, you know, all that business. With regards to plaster, I'll just put a quick note now in. I tend to order my plaster from a company called Maragon, which is Maragon, Maragon. And they are absolutely brilliant. They specialise in casting, you know, from the mould making through to the plaster, through to this release agent, sealing. And they're really good. I mean, I ordered some plaster and it came 2 days later. Absolutely brilliant company. They have loads of different plaster. I tend to use the Artist's Casting Plaster. That's the Artist Casting Plaster. Gives a really clean mark, very strong, very tough. So even thin tiles, it really holds holds its form and it produces a real fine detail, which is obviously something you're aiming for. So yeah, have a look at them and have some fun. Brilliant, and I shall be back shortly.